This episode of Decoding TV is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's, I'm loving it. I am David Chen.
And I'm Patrick Willems.
On today's episode of Decoding TV, we're going to be discussing Season 1, Episode 9 of Andor, entitled, Nobody's Listening!
David,
Nobody's listening!
Can I just say, straight up, we were bemoaning the fact that the episode titled Announcement, it created a bad podcast title for us because it made people think that it was not about an episode, that it was just us making an announcement. And this episode is going to sound like we're complaining about
It
the
sounds like a
fact
cry
that,
for help. It sounds like a cry for help.
it's like nobody's listening to our podcast.
But
well, hopefully they are, because we have a good episode of Andor to talk about.
Indeed. That's just the title of the episode, though. Also, but I think it's the first one that has exclamation mark or any punctuation really in it, other than like dashes and stuff, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, these episode titles tend to be like a word. And this is at least a sentence.
But it's nobody's listening! Exclamation mark. So,
Yeah.
and therefore contractually, you must read it that way at all times.
You have to.
You can find more episodes of this podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. Email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. And find us on YouTube and TikTok and Twitter at Decoding TV. Patrick, before we get into Season 1, Episode 9, as usual, we got to correct some errors that were made last episode. We got to follow up on a few things, a lot of comments, a lot of emails. Keep those emails coming into decodingtv@gmail.com. I want to start by saying Niamos, Morlana Club Mix. We had said that this was a track that did not appear until later on in the series. In fact, Niamos, which appears on the soundtrack that has been released, appeared in the very first episode of Andor. It was the song playing in the club, in the brothel that Andor walks into.
It was diegetic music?
Yes, diegetic music. I went back. I actually rewatched the first few episodes of Andor this week because the show is really good and I enjoy watching it. And yeah.
Wait, David, you have time. You have time not only to sleep in between your millions of podcast recordings, but also to rewatch the shows that you're already covering?
I'm not rewatching every show, Patrick Willems.
Okay.
But Andor, the show is really good. The show is really good.
It's really good.
It's very delightful. Anyway, so many people point out the Niamos track does appear on the opening episode. So it technically was in the first 4 episodes, even though we heard it again later on when we visited the planet of Niamos. So
this raises questions suddenly, because I wasn't aware of this. Okay, first of all, this means that they listen to Nicholas Britell music in the world of Star Wars. Secondly, I wonder, as far as I'm aware, Star Wars fans and experts, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only genre of music in the world of Star Wars that I'm aware of is jizz. And David, you're familiar with jizz, right?
Tell me about jizz, Patrick.
Jizz is spelled like jazz, but with an I instead of an A.
Okay.
Is the kind of music that's usually played in cantinas. Figrin Dan and the Modal Nodes.
Do you think there's like different qualities of jizz, or is it just all like one consistency?
Well, this is my question, because we hear jizz music. It is specified that we are hearing jizz music in the cantina in A New Hope. That we are hearing jizz music, in Jabba's palace. And I'm wondering. Well, those types of music also sound vaguely similar, while this like club music, like Morlana Club Mix, sounds so different. And so I'm wondering, does this still fall under the classification of jizz, or is this, I don't know, some new genre that we're not aware of?
It's a good question. I have so many questions about jizz in the Star Wars universe. Like, if we were in the Star Wars universe, would and you had jizz that you liked, and I had jizz, would the jizz be different? Would it all kind of sound the same? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
that's my question.
David, are you aware of the official Star Wars term for a jizz musician?
No, what is it?
It's a jizz whaler.
Fascinating.
I'm so happy whenever someone gets to learn that for the first time.
Yeah, no. I mean, this has enriched my life immeasurably, Patrick. So thank you for that. But anyway, thanks for the corrections on that. Appreciate it. Patrick, last week you made reference to a line that Cinta says about Vel being, having a rich family, and I did not hear it, and many people said they heard it, and it actually led to some speculation as to who Vel actually is. Somebody on our YouTube comments speculated that Vel might be Luthen's daughter, which I thought was a pretty good theory. A little obvious, but a pretty good theory. And I was a little bit bummed that we didn't have a chance to put out that theory, because if and when we found out who Vel was, we'd look like geniuses. Well, I'm glad we didn't put out that theory, because this episode we found out who Vel is, and I don't believe it is Luthen's daughter.
No, I mean, that would be, after what we learned here, that would make things very convoluted.
Yes.
But I will say, I am just happy that for once a comment confirmed that Patrick was correct.
Indeed.
I usually expect them to tell me where I'm wrong or I missed something. So this time I was on the right track.
Christopher at youtube.com/decoding TV wrote about Saw Gerrera and provided some background information. It's important to note one of the reasons why Saw Gerrera is annoyed with some of the other factions in the rebellion. Gerrera was in an anti-separatist resistance group from Andor in the Clone Wars, and separatists killed his sister during a mission, end quote.
I've seen that episode. I have seen that one.
I think that one of the things that's interesting to note, too, is that like some people on YouTube and other places have been commenting how much care and attention has been paid to the lore in this show, for one of the shows that probably is least lore heavy or lore emphasizing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't need to know any lore to watch Andor, but if you know a lot of the lore, it does reward you for that, right?
I know. I recall in one interview with Tony Gilroy I listened to, it might have been the one on the Empire podcast, he talked about how on the show he worked very closely with Pablo Hidalgo, who's the head of the Lucasfilm story group, where basically, because Tony Gilroy is like, I don't know much about Star Wars, he would just say like, we need like a model of ship, we need like a planet, just like fill in the blanks here, and then Pablo Hidalgo would just be like, Here, just like kind of like insert the I guess like continuity, like correct things to slot them in there, and that really is like kind of the ideal way that the Lucasfilm Story Group should work, where it's like the filmmakers have their story, and then they just help like fill in the blanks or like connect the dots or whatever, just so that it all links up, but the continuity never gets in the way of the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have swung really far in the other direction in the last few years, right? But I think that I don't know if I'd say that's ideal, Patrick. Like, I would say probably the ideal is somewhere in between, where like the lore helps to motivate a big story, and then like more lore helps to fill in the blanks. But like, but that the story can stand on its own, like, right? So I think that's probably. But anyway, either way, however they're doing it, it's going great in Andor, right? So.
Yeah. And although, again, what I think is very funny is not so great for the people whose like job it is to literally make videos about Easter eggs.
Yes, indeed.
There was a day or two ago, there was this like IGN video going around that people were dunking on Twitter about, there was like, here's an Easter egg from the latest episode of Andor, and it was just that it was the same kind of security camera that showed up in one shot in one scene that was also in A New Hope. And it's like, oh man, the Easter egg hunters are sorry, the Gunters are really grasping at straws to find anything to talk about here.
Yeah, indeed. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. You know,
Nope.
Movies and TV shows can be more than just Easter egg hunts. They can have stories that stand on their own. And that's what we're looking for and enjoying in a show like Andor.
Exactly.
So, Patrick Willems.
David Chen.
First of all, big thanks to all the people that wrote in, commented, youtube.com/decodingtv, decodingtv@gmail.com. Keep those messages rolling in.
Yeah.
What did you think of season 1, episode 9? Nobody's listening.
I I love that you're keeping that going.
Yes.
David Chen, I thought this episode was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it might have actually been better than last week's, which I thought was great. Yeah, it genuinely had, especially the early interrogation stuff with Bix was maybe the most like some of the most harrowing stuff I've ever seen in anything Star Wars related. Honestly, one of the more harrowing interrogation scenes I've seen in anything in a while.
Yes.
They found a genuinely like inventive and like astoundingly cruel new way to torture someone, and the whole prison storyline became. We talked last time about how it was sort of kind of like a great dystopian science fiction story about this like just impossibly horrible prison system, and it got worse this time around. And the developments there, loved them all. Thought they're all fascinating. Andy Serkis got way more to do this time around. You know what? To make a reference to our sponsor for this episode, I'm loving it.
Well, I really enjoy this episode as well. I mean, it is definitely you sense kind of the structure of the show. It definitely feels like the midpoint of a 3-episode arc, and that is what it is, right? And with the final, next week will be the concluding part of this arc, and then there's going to be 2 additional episodes. What a blessing to have 12 episodes of this show, Patrick, huh? So you definitely feel like it's kind of one of those middle transition episodes, but I agree with you. This idea of the torture methods were really creative without being graphic, which is really, they really kind of thought about, hey, if we were going to, let's start from the ground level of like, we want to torture someone into submission, but we don't want to make it graphic because this is a family show. How would we do that? How would we use our imagination to do that? And the way they came up with was incredibly disturbingly creative, I will say. So anyway, I like the episode as well. And I mean, if you are shipping Karn and Miro, this
David,
episode delivers the goods. You know what I'm saying? Like,
David, I was going to wait to talk about
let's wait. Let's
the
wait
most
to talk
important
about
part of the episode.
Yeah. We'll
because wait. I mean, I've been on board the Kiro ship for a while now, and that Kiro ship. I mean, we are hoisting the sails.
Pull up anchor, and we're climb aboard because the ship is out of whatever the ship terminology is. That's what it is.
We're out of the harbor, man.
Yes, we're out of the harbor. We're in the high seas. We're exploring brave and bold new territory right now with the Karn Miro ship this episode. So
hashtag Kiro for those following along on Twitter.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So let's dive into the episode, Patrick Willems. What we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about all the stuff that happens on Narkina 5. Okay? So we'll dive into all the Narkina 5 stuff. It's very separate than all the other stuff that happens in the episode. So we'll do the Narkina 5 stuff first. Then we'll get to what happens the rest of the episode. The short version of what happens in this plotline is that one of the people on Andor's crew of workers slowly becomes more and more infirm until the end of the episode when he suffers a massive stroke and then is euthanized.
Which also makes me wonder, again, two things I want to preface this with. First of all, I'm sorry that I keep constantly bringing up things where I'm like, I've never seen this in Star Wars. And also, I'm sorry if this has happened in Star Wars and I'm not aware because I haven't read every tie-in novel ever written. But is this the first time someone's ever had a stroke in Star Wars?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
people
I don't
always
know.
Die from getting hit by blasters, or they die of, like in Revenge of the Sith, of a broken heart, or by often being impaled with a lightsaber. I've never heard of anyone suffering a massive stroke in Star Wars. And so this was, again, one of these kind of like, it's shocking to see these like very ordinary, like real world things just happen here.
Yeah. I mean, this is what Andor is giving us as a society. A Star Wars that you can relate to. Corporate bureaucracy. People struggling with health issues that we deal with in our lives. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying it and enjoying the show and finding it to be really relevant in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, Andor
this is Star Wars tackles the prison industrial complex.
Indeed. I mean, Andor is anti-government, anti-cop, anti-prison industrial complex. It's and Disney is a company that made it, so it's really fascinating to ponder the themes of this show. In addition to Andor's colleague Ulaf kind of slowly fading during the course of this episode and eventually being euthanized, we learn a few other things. Andor is collaborating with another person that is working on his floor to try to detect weaknesses in the system. There's a moment where he's like, "Okay, let's just go for it now. Like, let's just do it and be legends. Let's just attack him now." And the guy's like, "I don't quite think it's ready yet."
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting, because the show is always cross-cutting between multiple storylines, and I'm wondering about the passage of time, because this episode when it picks up on Narkina 5, it seems like it's set at least a week after the last episode left off. Like, Cassian's been there for a little while, long enough to have like worked out a routine, to have really gotten into the swing of things with like the work they're doing, enough to clearly like have a routine of taking a bathroom break, hammering out this little panel in the wall where he has a little like makeshift saw to saw away at this pipe. And like they're actively planning an escape. And yet, so this is I'd say at least a week jump in time. And then with Bix,
I don't know if I would come to that conclusion yet, Patrick. I just want to put that out there. Like, because at last episode, we saw like 30 shifts later flashback. So
okay.
True. Very possible that like during that time he's already like befriended people and stuff. We didn't see it. We didn't see any of that last episode. But it's possible it was already all happening.
Okay, true.
I don't know. Yeah.
But even taking that 30 shifts later into account, it seems like it's only been a few days on Ferrix since he visited there, and then Dedra Mira was talking to Bix.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, it's just like, I'm sure they'll explain it all at some point, and this is not a complaint. I'm just wondering what the timelines are.
Yeah. This is a thing that happens with shows like Game of Thrones or whatever, where like you have multiple timelines that are evolving at different paces, and then at some point they're all going to intersect.
Right.
And we'll find out when it is. But yeah, I'd agree. It's getting a little complicated when it comes to the timeline.
Can I also mention one thing that I just learned before the recording of this that I thought was fun?
Okay, tell me.
So do you remember a dumb comment I threw out in episode 6? Our episode about episode 6, where I said that, so in the scene where Skeen dies, where Andor kills Skeen, I was like, Skeen looks kind of like one of those muggers at the very beginning of the 1989 Batman. It turns out that the actor who plays Ulaf was one of the two muggers in the opening scene of the 1989 Batman.
Oh my God.
He's the guy that Michael Keaton says, "I'm Batman" to.
Incredible. What a career.
Yeah. What a career. The actor is Christopher Fairbanks, or Fairbank. They shot Batman in the UK. He was doing an American accent there, but yeah. He's the guy who said, "What are you, man?"
Amazing. Wow. Amazing pull, Patrick Willems. Nicely done.
Thank you.
So a few other things happen this episode, right? Like Ulaf is like slowly fading. He's not as fast on his feet with his hands, and starts forgetting things, and so you kind of see his decline.
There's a really stressful part when they have one of those times where they're all ordered to like stand straight and put their hands on their heads, and he can't, and he's basically like having a stroke and can't even stand up, and they're all trying to prop him up just so that like he doesn't get like pulled aside or flagged, And yeah, it's really tense stuff.
Yeah. There is a scene that happens in these tubes that they kind of wait in as they go to and from their work area. And obviously, some of the people have figured out a way to use hand signals to communicate with others. But what they discover is that there's been some kind of accident on one of the other floors or something like that. It's very vague at first.
It's floor 2. Just something happened at floor 2.
So my understanding of what happened this episode, Patrick, is that they let someone out. It was like someone's turn to leave. They finally got to the end of their sentence, and they couldn't keep doubling it for some reason. They're just like, they got to the end of the sentence, and they moved that person rather than release them. They moved them to another floor. That person presumably was unhappy about it, told everyone about what happened, and then there was an uprising, or people started thinking about having an uprising, and the prison's way of dealing with it was just to literally murder all the people on that floor.
That's
my interpretation.
Electrify the floors and killed them all.
Yeah.
And which
Unit
is
2-5, Unit 2-5, I believe is what it is. So yeah.
Which is horrifying, because an idea of a prison where you spend all your time there working and like doing the work in the hope that eventually you'll finish the work and will reach the end of your sentence and will be set free. And this is basically just confirming that no, you'll just be shuffled into a new part of the prison and recycled forever because you are just as they say in this episode, they are cheaper than droids. They are utterly disposable, and that they are just trapped there forever. And I thought one of the most powerful parts of this episode was watching the arc that Andy Serkis's character goes through.
Yes.
Because he's introduced in the last episode really just as like the jerk who's like the prisoner who's kind of like taken the sides of the guards and just is like, he's like on the other side just to like get ahead, and just yells at everybody to like stand up straight and work harder and stuff like that. And in this episode, you realize that like he, really has believed that like by following the rules, they will get through this and be treated fairly and be released. And then him just like watching his face as he's like learning this information and still having to like keep doing his job as he's giving the orders and shouting at them to stand up straight and fall in line and all of that, while he's learning that like, oh, all of these rules that he had bought into are absolutely a lie, that he is just he's stuck there forever until he dies, just like everyone else. And basically like this is the beginning of him pretty much being radicalized. And like the final line of this episode is so good and so exciting. Like it's interesting comparing this to the Aldhani arc, because the Aldhani arc in its second episode was very much the like, let's slow down and get to know all the characters and talk more and learn about everyone's backstories and motivations and stuff like that. And I feel like this second episode is just escalating everything and just ramping everything up to the point where like we're ready for things to explode as soon as the next episode begins.
Yeah. Agreed completely. What's so great about Andor as a show is you get to see characters evolve, process new information, and also realize the fundamental injustice of the systems that they're in. They as you said, come in thinking that if they follow the rules and do what they're told, that everything's going to be okay. And when they learn that that's not the case, they often decide to take action, because like at that point, what is there to lose? And that's certainly the journey that we see Andor go on. Right. And also now Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis in the show. And I do also think I appreciated the nod to kind of the Star Wars question of why were there droids before, but now there's human stormtroopers, like why? And the answer is they're cheaper. Like people are cheaper to make and control, or not make, but like control and manage than and are more disposable than droids, I guess. That was like kind of a big question that people had after seeing Phantom Menace, right? And now it is reaffirmed in this this show as well. Another thing that someone at decodingtv.com pointed out or commented or speculated is like, do we think these folks are building the Death Star, Patrick Willems? Like, what are they working on exactly? I mean, it could be anything. It could be anything. Like, it could be TIE fighter parts. It could be the Death Star. It could be anything. I didn't know if you had it in your head canon. I didn't know if you thought it was anything specific.
I mean, I thought a bit about it in the previous episode.
Yeah.
When we're looking at what they're building, and it's like they're just building the same like gear or same like just I guess piece of machinery over and over and over again. And considering how giant all the structures in Star Wars are, like how massive a Star Destroyer is, I'm like, it could be anything. These pieces could go into literally anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also considering how uninterested Tony Gilroy and his team seem to be in Easter eggs are like winking at you like ooh, like this character is this person you recognize. I would not be remotely surprised if we never find out what they're building, if it's just stuff for something, and there's no big reveal where they're like, I don't know, where some Imperial guy says, sir, look how much of the work we've done on Project Death Star, or and then we like see a computer screen with like to show how like a partially built Death Star. Like, I'm not expecting that to happen.
I do think that one of the things that Andor does really well is it uses implication and hinting and things in the background. Andor weaponizes your imagination against yourself, basically. So there's lots of people in the show Andor that are put through terrible things. They're tortured, or they have physical punishment enacted on them. And the show is really careful to not be graphic about these things. You often see them in the background, or you only see people's reaction to the thing. You don't actually see the thing that happens. And I think that's really good filmmaking, because what you imagine in your head is probably worse than anything they could come up with, you know, in terms of visuals or makeup or special effects. We see that in Andor episode 9 with both a bunch of prisoners on Narkina 5 getting zapped again, and also Bix and the thing that she goes through, which we'll talk about later. We never really see directly kind of the consequences of it. We just get to imagine it in our head. And I think that's really great filmmaking. Whenever you see the people zapped, they're always like kind of in the background and out of focus in general.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're just like imagining what's going on.
And I think a major part of this is carrying on one of the great Star Wars traditions that's been true since the very first movie, which is just having like the best sound design in the game.
Yeah, totally.
We'll talk about the Bix scene, but I've rewatched that scene a few times, and the sound, just the use of sound in there, like in that sequence with the scene transition, is one of the more impressive small bits of filmmaking I've seen in a while. And yeah, again, it's just the sound for the like the floors electrifying, the sounds for, you know, people getting zapped. It is like they stick with you the first time, you remember them, and they make an impression every single time they appear.
Totally. Any other thoughts on the Narkina 5 storyline, Patrick Willems, before we move on?
It is I have heard there, I mean, in general, it seems like the show has been received very positively across the board. Yeah. Even though it seems like it's not creating quite as much like mainstream buzz as prior Star Wars shows.
Yeah.
And one of the few complaints I see pop up now and again is that Cassian Andor seems a little bit more passive and a little bit like less defined as a character than other people in the show. And I think this is very much intentional, and that the arc of this season is really about how a guy who pretty much wants to live passively in the background and not get involved in anything is, like, through a series of events that happen to him, it reaches the point where he sees no option other than to get completely involved. And And in this episode, like, because like you look at the last one, and he's getting shuffled through the prison. He's like we talked about it. He pretty much he utters like what, a line or two of dialogue in the last episode, like barely anything. And in this one, he is already like when we jump in, he is already like working with other prisoners, starting to plan potential escape routes. They are strategizing, keeping track of like the guards' routes, keeping track of when they aren't wearing the boots to protect themselves from like, meaning like, oh, if they don't have the boots on, they're not going to electrify the floors right now. And so we could be safe to attack them. That kind of thing. He's getting angry in this episode.
Yeah.
And especially specifically like angry at like the imperial system at large, like the scene where the title of the episode comes from. And David, what's the title of this episode?
Nobody's listening.
There we go.
Listening.
But in that scene, that happens when they're in their bunks at night. Usually what we're used to we've seen a whole lot of movies and TV shows with stories set in prisons. And we're used to scenes where people are in their cells at night and they're talking, and then guards come around and like bang on the bars and are like, quiet in there, like no talking at night, like that kind of thing. And here, this is so different because Cassian is there yelling in his cell to the guy who is presumably like in charge of him. And no one cares. No one is listening. The Empire is so confident in the system that they've created. They think so little of the people in this system that they're not paying attention to them at all. And Cassian is both angry about how dehumanized they are, and also planning to take advantage of the overconfidence of the Empire. I can, even though he doesn't actively like make any huge leap in this episode, I can see the evolution happening there with his character. I can see how like probably next episode he's got to maybe make a jump forward.
I think it's a great point about Andor's arc on the show Andor. Like, it's a great point about Cassian Andor's arc on Andor because it works on two levels. Number one, on a filmmaking level, it's just more interesting to have an Andor that is super passive and just trying to get by and survive and doesn't want to get involved with any causes before he becomes the character that we see in Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Like, if he had already started the show Andor as captain in the rebellion, it's like, okay, that's, you know, where does that character have to go? So they clearly start him at a much more interesting point, I think, to see that journey. But the show Andor is obviously making, I think, a broader point that when you see the forces of evil rise up and you try to continue living your life of comfort, pretty soon you will be unable to do that and you will be forced to act. And it is up to you to decide when that is. But the sooner you act, usually it will go better for you. And I think that's something that's very a potent message for our times right now. So anyway, that is the Andor Narkina 5 storyline for this week's episode of the show.
I before we leave off this part of the episode, we do have to bring special attention just to the final scene of this episode. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's very important, and I really want to just talk about the final line.
Yes, so the final line is they've just euthanized Ulaf.
Well, specifically, Ulaf is like dying, and they call for like a doctor or like a med staff member, to come in. Yeah, which means that they send someone who's been in like a different floor.
Right. And that's when they find out that, hey, like, it's unlikely any of us are ever getting out of here. And then Andor then asks Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis, how many guards are there per floor? And I think he says, never more than 12 at a time. I think that's the last line, something along those lines, right? It's a great last line because it is in stark contrast to an earlier scene when Andor asked him the question, and he's like, I'm going to bed. Good night. You know, please stop talking, right? It's a great kind of parallel to that scene from earlier in the episode. Anything you wanted to highlight about it, Patrick?
Just it's so exciting because again, like you say, it is this parallel. It shows the arc Kino has taken.
Yes.
Where now he is pretty much on Andor's side with this, and it just like it tells you like, oh, they could pull this off. It's this is how overconfident the Empire is, how they're running this place. Like, never more than 12 at a time. That they can do it, and clearly they think they're going to.
At the same time, the idea that they would just like zap an entire floor's worth of guys, like, you know, dozens of guys, just kill without any thought or consequences is really chilling, you know? So they do have some, it's not just like they're running roughshod over the Empire. Like, there is a lot of danger they have to face. So we'll see how they face it.
Yeah.
But we do know where it ends up, right? We do know that Andor and Melshi get out of there at some point. So we know it has a happy question mark ending to some degree. Yeah, until they built the next Death Star in Return of the Jedi.
I mean, the entire place could blow up, and these are the only two guys who get away.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true. That's true. So, anyway, that is the end of the Cassian Andor / Narkina 5 storyline for this week. Let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor, McDonald's. Patrick Willems, you know, when Andor gets out of Narkina 5, I bet there's one thing he's going to want to do immediately. What do you think that is, Patrick?
I think he's probably going to cruise on over to some, you know, nice planet, maybe Coruscant, maybe Scarif, and he's probably going to want to revisit, you know, the reliable like comforts of life.
Indeed.
I think he's going to cruise on over to a McDonald's.
Yes,
he's going to walk in there. He's going to talk to one of the crew members, and he's going to. And the thing about these crew members is, I bet they're going to remember that he likes a Big Mac with an extra pickle, and maybe it'll be a crew member, you know, that he's interacted with many times before on previous visits, and they'll greet him at the drive-thru when he cruises in with his land speeder. They'll greet him with a warm smile, and you know, and Cassian,
and he's going to be like, he's not going to say that was all worth it, but he's, you know, because he's obviously been through an ordeal, but he's going to say he's glad he's here now. This episode of Decoding TV is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. And as Patrick points out and sketches out beautifully, McDonald's has been a great source of comfort in many people's lives, and probably would be if it existed in the Star Wars universe. It's no surprise that here at Decoding TV, we love the idea of community. Patrick, you know about this, like, and I think you can sense it from all the comments that we get and that we talk about in every episode. You know,
we have a community here with our show.
Yes, we have been so grateful to foster a community of TV lovers, of Star Wars lovers who truly love each other's company, who can bond over our shared excitement about big shows such as Andor, such as The White Lotus. And that's why I'm really proud and excited for Decoding TV to partner with McDonald's, because they truly care about fostering a sense of community. And one of the biggest ways they do this is through their incredible crew members who work hard to make you feel like you're right at home when you stop into your local McDonald's. They certainly do that for me at my local McDonald's, which is right down the street from me. I love visiting there and have a great time and get great food every single time I'm there. So a huge thank you to McDonald's crew members everywhere for making our McDonald's visits even more special. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
I'm also loving it.
I'm glad. That's awesome. So Patrick, let's talk about some of the other stuff that happened this episode.
Great, because a lot happened in this episode.
Indeed. All right, let's start with the Ferric stuff. I think that's a good place to start, right? So
that's where the episode begins.
Yeah. And we basically learn from Dedra Meero. You know, there's a lot of monologuing from evil people in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And Bix is there. She's about to be tortured. And Dedra Meero gives her this whole speech, kind of reveals everything that she has learned from Pac, who we saw brutally tortured in the last episode. And by the way, later learned that he will be executed, which is just...
Yeah, Miro just casually they ask her if he should be hanged, and
I think it was like it was the prefect guy that Blevin made a prefect from an earlier episode. I think it was that guy.
Yeah.
Who's like kind of running Ferrex now, and he's like, "Hey, I'd like to hang this." Dedra says, "Hey, you can do whatever you want with Pac," and he's like, "I'd like to hang him, show everyone who's boss." And she's like, "Fine, whatever."
Yep.
Which is, I mean, Pac barely did anything wrong. Like he went to a separatist meeting, we learn, and was paid to keep this radio alive, which they obviously Bix used to kind of siphon stolen equipment to people
also,
like Luthen.
Hearing about someone's like record of they once attended a separatist meeting is like, this is by far the closest to like the Red Scare I've ever heard. I mean, like, as in, we always hear the Empire compared to the obvious fascist regimes like Nazis, like most specifically, but this but that aspect and like the separatist meaning, it feels very close to like, that's just America in like the 50s.
Yeah. And she wants to know everything that Bix knows, and she gives this whole speech about it. Now, I just gotta say, I feel like this show is genius because it has spent a lot of the last 8 episodes trying to get you to sympathize with Dedra Meero, right? And for people such as myself, it's actually worked because you want to see this as like, hey, this is it's a woman trying to make it in a man's empire world. And yes, there's all these men around her who are incompetent and they want to have more power than her, and they're cramping her style. And when she finally triumphs in that big meeting, like, boy, are we rooting for Dedra Meero. And then this episode, you see who she really is, which is like super evil. She is super duper evil. And it's fascinating because in any other show, Patrick Willems, we would just cut straight to this scene. We would never have met Dedra Meero before. We wouldn't, that character wouldn't even have a name, right? And they would just start with a monologue and how they're going to torture you, and that's it. And then they go away and you never see them again. This is the show that spends 7 or 8 episodes being like, here's Dedra Meero's back. I'm surprised we haven't met her family yet. Here's Dedra Meero's backstory at work. Here's all the little the indignities she needs to struggle with while she's trying to make a living in the Empire at the ISB. So for them to like put all that background in and then just whoop, like now she is literally the worst. It's just a really fascinating way to tell the story, I thought. What do you think, Patrick?
Because we've seen scenes kind of like this before. And like we've talked about on this podcast before, we are in Star Wars, we're almost exclusively used to seeing Imperial characters like this just be at best 2-dimensional inhuman monsters. It's just that's just their thing. And one of the many interesting things about this show is that they spend so much time humanizing these characters who would normally just be inhuman monsters, and showing them dealing with coworkers and trying to impress their bosses and stuff like that, and doing all these things that lead us to have conversations like we've often had, where it's like, yes, we know they're fascists, but also, like, I kind of understand the position she's in at work, and I would like her to get one up on that jerk Blevin. And then you get to this scene, and you basically see, and this scene is pretty much what all the work she's been doing for the rest of the season has been leading to, because she just wants to get to this point so bad. And it's like, oh, this is who she really is.
Yeah. Hold on though, Patrick. I would say that I think the function of a lot of those scenes in humanizing this character, like in our minds, when we view videos of war crimes or whatever in the past, we think, oh, well, I would never. I not only can't even understand that, I can't understand anyone that would be like that, And I think showing a character like Dedra Meero in her fullness is meant to show you, hey, these are human beings. They deal with the same indignities as all of us, and they can be also horrifying monsters as well. Like it's to make it so that the idea of these characters being monsters does not feel so separate from what we encounter in the real world. You know what I'm saying?
David, I totally agree. And I think this gets into something that we've talked about before on the show, that Andor seems very interested in dealing with, which is, and exploring, which is the concept of the banality of evil. The idea of people who do not view themselves as doing evil things, but because like they're basically just doing their regular boring office job or whatever. But it is in service of an evil fascist goal. And so that's what you get from and most of the time Dedra Meero is just a person working at the office, dealing with regular workplace stuff, and it's important to realize she is a human being, and then she is capable of this. She is capable of casually saying yeah, sure, hang that guy, whatever, I don't care. I guess maybe it'll send a message. Sure, he didn't really do anything to deserve being executed publicly and hanged in the streets for his neighbors to see. And but let's get into the stuff with Bix.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say as far as the evil monologues go, it was a great one. Just a great. Dedra Meero knows how to do good evil monologuing. You know what I'm saying?
I've watched this episode twice. I did get a little tangled up in her metaphor about. I mean, it was making sense for a bit about being a fisherman and casting out a net to try to catch fish. But then when she has the line to Bix where she leans in really close and says are you a fish or a thief?
That was I didn't like that. I like the idea of hey, people think everything's a fish, and it's there's things that aren't fish. There's things that are I
think that was maybe the only clumsy line in the whole thing. But that was the thing about this scene that I found really chilling is just the fact that everyone, including Bix, knows that there's nothing she can really say to get out of whatever this torture is going to be. It's going to happen. It is inevitable. She's Meero is going to do this to her and wants to. And then and this whole time there is in the background, while Meero is monologuing, there's this guy named Dr. Gorst who is prepping something in the background, turned away from her, and she'll just make references to Dr. Gorst. And then finally, when Meero leaves the room and Dr. Gorst steps in, and again, this is, it's a Star Wars show, and Star Wars is, generally aiming to be mostly appropriate for all. Basically, it's always still going to be PG-13 at the harshest.
Yes.
And even though this is a fairly adult show, thematically and in terms of presentation, stuff like that, they're not going to be breaking fingers on this show.
Yeah.
And so you are wondering okay, what is a torture they can pull off? Because usually in Star Wars, tortures we see are just especially in the original trilogy, or are actually in Force Awakens as well. It'll just be some weird machine with a bunch of sparks coming off of it,
right, or using the Force to torture, as in Force Awakens, right? Yeah.
It's usually these fairly abstract things where it's I don't know, I guess it's really hot or something like that.
Yeah.
But what this torture is okay. I wrote this down because I wanted to be clear on exactly how it works, because it's horrifying. And the way this scene is directed and acted and written, I thought was so effective. Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So on an outer rim moon called Dizon Frey, that basically there was a sentient species that lived there that the Empire needed to clear out, as in basically just wipe out, genocide, to make room for an Imperial refueling center. Not even like housing or anything like that, like a refueling center. And while they were just executing and just wiping out and killing this entire species, they happened to get audio recordings of their like dying screams and cries. And they discovered that like by like re-editing some of these like frequencies of the recordings, specifically the sounds of the children, it could have this like extreme physical effect on a human being. And so basically they strap on this like basically this headset with headphones to force Bix to just like listen to, probably at extreme volumes, just the death cries of children of a race that the Empire wiped out.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also learn that, they remove the headphones later, and Dedra Meero says, hey, you want to tell us the truth right now, the whole truth, because it's repeat listenings that can cause the most damage, which is just like, oh, like that means like the first listening already caused probably permanent damage. She also talked about Pac, like the price he paid was not worth it. It's like, what was the price? Probably like permanent physical damage from listening to these sounds. So again, it's all implication. You never actually hear the sound.
This is okay. Can I just talk about the moment where they put the headset on her? Because this for me was like the moment of the episode.
Yes.
Like I could not believe how effective this was.
Yes.
So they have this shot like pushing in this tight close up, like as like on Bix's face as Dr. Gorst puts the headset like over her ears, and they're pushing in and like into her eyes, as then all other sound. Like once like the headphones come on, all other sound drops out except for her breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where, so you're so focused on that and you're just waiting for the sound of what the sound that you have just heard described for the last like 4 minutes is going to kick in, and and like every second that she keeps like that you hear her breathing without the sound kicking in, it gets more and more agonizing, and like the suspense just builds and builds, and then finally, and you don't hear the sound because this is one of those sounds that there's nothing they could create that would actually deliver on it. You just hear her suddenly like scream in agony, and then the way this edit is done, where she starts screaming, they cut to a shot outside the door as suddenly, I believe it's Meero steps out the door, like closes the door behind her, close up on like footsteps, like on feet walking away down the hall, and immediately like as her screams continue, hard cut into on
Arcana 5?
On Arcana 5, just a bolt being drilled into a machine. And just like that escalation at the end of that scene, and the beautiful but also horrifying audio cut of the scream into like the drilling bolt, I thought was like really powerful filmmaking.
I agree. Really good. There's a lot of cutaways to Arcana 5 that were kind of like interesting transitions. They're using the sounds of Narkina 5 to mirror the horrors that other characters are feeling. So I thought there were some good transitions this episode. And my interpretation of the scene, by the way, Patrick, is like he puts on the headphones and you see Bix breathing really hard for a few seconds before she screams. So my sense is like she puts them on and the headphones are already blasting this noise in, and the first few seconds she's like trying to resist having any reaction, and then she can't resist anymore. But yes, it's all really effectively done and really, really horrifying and leaves so much to the imagination. So bravo for creating one of the most harrowing sequences we've ever seen in Star Wars. Toby Haynes, I think. Episode, right?
Toby Haynes, I've been singing his praises for years. Really knocked this one out of the park.
Yeah. Okay. Couple of other things about the Meero storyline. Let's follow kind of Meero around, right? There is Meero goes back to the ISB, and we kind of get a sense of what is going on like what fruit was extracted from this whole series of interrogations and terrorizing. They're keeping Bix alive because she is one of the only people in the galaxy that can visually identify who Axis is, aka Luthen. Which did strike me as a bit of a loose end for Luthen to leave. Like, he was willing to murder Cassian Andor, but I guess it's like Bix was on his side, so he didn't think it was necessary to murder her. But you get the sense that Luthen cannot be visually identified by very many people. They're also question of like, hey, why aren't you torturing Marva? And it's like, well, she's old and frail, and maybe Andor's going to come back for her, so we'll like keep an eye on her, right? By the way, there was a conversation earlier on where it's like Pac went to a separatist meeting and was paid to keep this radio alive by a woman who a contact who I think it's implied was Clea. I don't know if you had any interpretation of that, but anyway,
that was what I assumed as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So Partagaz is like super happy with all this information. He's like, wow, maybe if there's an Aldani connection, like that could really increase interest in this topic, you know? Like,
well, this whole thing comes up because they learn from Bix because you know, Bix is only human, and I'd probably admit a bunch of stuff if I had to deal with that as well. But she says that Cassian did come back to Ferrix like a few days earlier, and that she did see him, and that he was clean shaven. So she does give up this information, and this is how they start to put together that maybe he was involved in Aldani because they say that Bix says that he had money. So he had money.
And he was clean shaven. Right?
He had money and he was clean shaven. And they say the people who pulled the Aldani heist were clean shaven because they had to blend in as guards. So I mean, the thing is, Miro is good at her job. She has figured out that correctly that Cassian was at Aldani. Yeah. And so yeah, she's impressing the higher ups. You know, I bet she wishes Blevin was there to like, you know, feel bad about his failure once again. But yeah, she's piecing things together.
We get a couple scenes with Cyril Karn, just more scenes of his mom really ragging on him, and
okay,
she is not happy with him. And then he says, I got a promotion, which I actually think we are led to understand is true. He was not lying to her.
He did get promoted. He mentions it again.
Because Miro basically helped to clear his name, I think is kind of the implication. Go ahead.
Don't jump ahead here.
Oh, okay.
You're skipping over important stuff. First of all, with the scene with Karn and Edie, his mom, first of all, we learn that Cyril has a private box. This is huge content. He has a private box, and he's mad that she looked in it. So there's that, which I just think is incredible. Also, one of my favorite moments that Cyril Karn has had on screen, and I have a lot of favorite Karn moments. We have him picking up his cereal bowl and slurping milk from it. Incredible. And then we have the best scene of the episode.
I mean, you're saying episode, Patrick. I submit in the series thus far, right?
You know what? I would not argue with that because I loved the scene so much.
So much.
Look, we've mentioned already in this episode that, look, this is the #1 podcast that you should be listening to if you are all aboard the Kiro ship. And because I think we started that ship. I think we built that ship.
I mean, we called it. I have to say.
We did. We said it way before those characters had ever met. Just like, I hope they meet because they are made for each other.
Yes.
And then, and last week, very exciting, they finally met in the interrogation room. And boy, oh boy, this week, whew. Okay. Cyril is just loitering outside the ISB offices and just like cuts in front of Miro when she's coming in because he has to talk to her. And he says to her, I come sometimes to see if I'll see you. He has been going there repeatedly just to hope that he'll run into her.
He'll catch a glimpse of Miro, right?
He is in love. It is. I wrote down the quote of the episode. As much as everyone is probably, like I've seen everyone on Twitter quoting like, never more than 12 at a time. But the quote of the episode to me is, just being in your presence, I realized that life is worth living. I realized that if nothing else, there was justice and beauty in the galaxy. And if I just kept going, perhaps my deranged belief that there was something better fated for me in the future was a dream worth clinging to.
Bravo.
It is incredible because he first thanks her for the promotion. She's like, I didn't promote you. But I guess she cleared his record by saying, she gave him a clean bill of health is what she says. She said that, he was not like really responsible for these bad things happening. Then he got a promotion, but to Karn, he has met like a kindred spirit in this world. Someone who shares his ideals and his beliefs. Someone who also knows that Cassian Andor is the person they have to hunt down. He wants her so bad. She is so disgusted by him. She threatens to have him locked up on some Outer Rim planet. And I love it. I love this so much. These two awful people, these vile little pasty, sickly looking fascists, they're falling in love. It's happening. Kiro, number one ship on television right now.
Totally.
I've been calling it from the beginning.
Yeah. I will say I think we both called it. Like, I think I was on board the Kiro ship right along with you, Patrick.
David, you are my partner here.
Yes, I mean, I am. It is amazing because like everything that Cyril Karn does in the show is so pathetic, right? It's like he is constantly being humiliated on the show, and this is probably the biggest humiliation because it is one that he inflicted upon himself.
Absolutely,
by groveling at the foot of this person.
I mean, like the next thing I expect to see is him like throwing pebbles at her window at night to try to get her attention.
It is.
Do you think he'll show her his private box? I hope by the season finale, Karn shows Miro his private box. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I agree. It's great because of how diametrically opposed in attitude these two people are, right? Like, Cyril Karn is like, literally, I am alive today because of you. Like, if it wasn't for you, I would not wish to have the will to continue living. But knowing that there's someone out there that hates Cassian Andor as much as me helps motivate me. And he is nothing to her. He is a gnat, a fly flying around her face that she's trying to swat away. It's amazing to watch. I just love seeing Dedra Miro's reaction to like literally everything he's saying, because there's not even a hint. There's not even a hint of affection there. Not even a hint of sympathy or any recognition that, hey, this other person is like, this is another human being in front of me that's like, bearing their soul to me. Nothing. Just nothing. It's a brick wall.
The part when he says, I keep thinking back to our conversation last month. She says, you were brought in for questioning.
It wasn't a conversation. It was an interrogation.
It's so funny. It is truly so entertaining. And I can't wait to see more of these people. And again, it's a real testament to the show that I will be so delighted and laughing at this scene with Dedra Miro after her scenes from earlier in this episode.
Yes.
Where she's like, honestly, I'm thinking like, she's like really at this point, like a more like vile, loathsome character than like Darth Vader was.
or Krennic, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, compared to these people, Krennic is like a hero.
So Miro goes to the office, and like one of her underlings says, "Hey, we found a random pilot who basically they were able to like detect that they were using stolen Imperial equipment, right?" They then sent Dr. Gorst over to the thing. And by the way, I just want to say, like, these torture guys in TV shows and movies, they always have a pretty specific look. They always look just a little bit off in terms of like the haircut, the wardrobe, just a little bit off. I watched True Lies the other day on Hulu, which I'd strongly recommend. And in True Lies, there's a guy who's like supposed to torture Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if you remember, and he has a lot of Gorst vibes. Patrick. Anyway, I'm just saying,
You're right.
A type. It's a type.
I mean, to be fair, Gorst really fits in pretty perfectly amongst like literally every Imperial person in the show.
Totally.
Also, the actor playing him is Joshua James. For anyone wondering,
yeah. Both he and Dedra Meero give some great monologues this episode, about how evil they are. So anyway, they capture this pilot. They do the Gorst treatment on them. They interrogate him, and they basically find out that what Luthen was talking to Saw Gerrera about last episode, the raid on Spellhouse, is in the works. And it's Anto Krieger's, like he's supervising it. I don't think they know that Anto Krieger is on the other side yet, is my understanding, was my takeaway. Because Anto Krieger is Anto Krieger working for the Empire at this point? Like, do we remember what his deal was?
No. He's a separatist leader. It's like,
okay. So they know he's evil. Okay, got it. Okay. Or they know he's against the Empire.
Yes. I mean, it's the thing where the rebellion is kind of fractured into multiple groups, and so he's in one group. But I mean, like the Empire, they're talking about this rebel pilot who's part of the group run by Krieger.
Got it. So Anto Krieger is on their radar, and they know to be suspicious that he might be involved in this attack on Spellhouse. Also, they mention, I think, that the pilot that they interrogated was heading to Kafrene, which is the place that is in one of the opening sequences of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. In Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, Cassian Andor is meeting with a contact who is supposed to give him information about a planet killer device, right? So like
the Ring of Kafrene, the cool place that's like two planets like
upside down,
with like a city in between them.
Yeah, exactly. So nice Rogue One reference there, and kind of shows where we're heading with this story. But they are basically going to try to stop the Spellhouse thing. I'm very curious, like how they're like. How much of the Spellhouse thing are we going to know about? Is that going to be the next Aldhani type set piece or not? I'm very curious. So
also, can we talk about Miro's plan about what to do with this pilot?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because they're trying to figure out, like, okay, do we just blow up his ship? Do we? But like, they're like, oh, they don't know he's been captured yet, and so her plan is, just kill the pilot and then damage his ship, but make it seem like it had an accident, and then have it drift down, to Kafrene to like be picked up there. But just again, she is just casually ordering executions left and right.
And here's the thing, Patrick, in an earlier scene, I might have been like, go Dedra, go do that thing you're doing. And now after seeing her brutally torture Bix, I'm like, okay, I'm not rooting for you. I'm not rooting for this to succeed anymore, So,
David, I'm sorry that Dedra finally broke your heart, and you're no longer Team Dedra.
I'm no longer Team Dedra. I mean, they are against freedom for everyone, she is against freedom and justice. So I guess it was always the case, and I just didn't allow myself to see it,
On the one hand, she is an evil fascist who tortures people. On the other hand, she's just trying to impress her boss.
All right. So we'll see how that plays out with Anto Krieger and Spellhouse and this plan of hers. I expect we'll see that next episode. Only other thing to mention about this episode is Mon Mothma.
And the big revelation of this episode.
Yes. So Mon Mothma, she's giving a speech against the Pord, the PORD. No one's listening to her. No one gives a crap, But she goes home and her driver says, "Hey, your cousin's here." She's like, "What? My cousin's here already?" And we find out that Mon Mothma's cousin is Vel. Is that right?
Yes, Vel is her cousin.
I was losing my mind when I saw this. You know?
I know. And this coming right after like what seemed like a pretty plausible theory, that a listener sent in about maybe she's Luthen's daughter. And I heard that and I was like, oh yeah, that checks out. Because I because the show is uninterested in the kind of like the winky connections to other Star Wars stuff, I was in no way expecting Vel to be someone from
Luke Skywalker's cousin or anything like that,
right? Yeah. Or like someone from Clone Wars or whatever. But I was like, yeah, just like, especially because we've been learning a bit more about her, the little tidbit about like her coming from money, and I was like, yeah, Luthen's daughter makes sense. But no, she is a Mothma, which is an exciting revelation, and like it's fun. Like she's there with Lita, and she's like Lita's cool aunt. She gets her like a nice new dress and stuff like that. There's a dinner table conversation where Perrin is like, "Oh, why aren't you married yet? Don't you know that like at your age, all the good husbands are probably gone except for widowers." Perrin sucks. Just want to be very clear about that.
Perrin sucks, but what's also interesting is Vel's reaction. She just basically goes along with whatever Perrin's saying, right? Because she is good. She's better than Mon. She's better than Mon, right? Mon is like, what? Like the outrage, like Mon is like freaking out basically every single scene we see her in. In the show, and Vel's just cool as a cucumber. She's like, yes, Perrin, insult my age and looks, like I don't care because my job is not to raise any suspicion whatsoever, right? And Vel is doing her job better than Mon is at this point, in my opinion.
Well, what I think is so interesting about this is that Mon is not aware that Vel was responsible for Aldhani.
Correct. I think that's
right. And she's like, "Where have you been for the last 6 months?" And she's like, "Oh,
she says, what does he have you doing? What does Luthen have you doing?"
Yes. He knows. Like they both know Luthen.
Yeah.
They're involved in different ways, but Mon is still basically the like the good liberal who is like trying to do things like the regular way and is like. Yeah. And like associates with some radicals, but still is like a little freaked out by their methods. And Vel is full radical, and like Mon is not entirely aware of like how radical her cousin is.
Correct, and her cousin's putting up a really good front. So
yeah,
it's nice to see Vel and Mon interacting with each other. But I think a point you made in a previous episode is just like. Whenever we see Mon Mothma prior to Andor, she's always has her stuff together. She's like, "Hey, I'm gonna send like 5,000 people to death," on behalf of the rebellion. Like very calm, cool, and collected. Here, as I indicated, she's really not on board full blown with the rebellion at this point in her life, and so it'll be interesting to see how her journey evolves. So.
Yeah, and then the last scene with Mon is her talking to Tay again.
Yes, I just want to mention that Vel does repeat the line that Cinta said to her of like, the rebellion comes first. Like we get everything else that's left over, or something along those lines. We've chosen she also says we've chosen a side. We're fighting against the dark, making something of our lives. End quote. So. Vel is a true believer. Also, really makes Vel's annoyance at Andor showing up like 4 or 5 episodes ago ring a lot more true, because if she's like used to the rich life and she's been sleeping in a tent for 5 months, I can understand why she was so annoyed. So anyway,
yeah. This guy gets to skip all the misery we've been dealing with.
Okay, anyway, so final scene with Mon. She's talking with Tay, and they're trying to figure out how to explain this like money that's like
right, and he's saying it's not as quite as easy to like set this thing up as as she hoped it would be, unless she's able to make a huge deposit of 400,000 credits. And she's like, I need a loan for that. And so this is when he's like, well, I have a guy who could help you, and it is Davo Skulden. And to be clear, Davo Skulden is not, to our knowledge, a pre-existing Star Wars character. He's not a character who's appeared in the show before. We don't know anything about him other than that Mon is shocked by this idea and considers him to be a thug. And so this makes me very excited to potentially meet Davo Skulden in maybe the next episode.
Yeah. We got some great new Star Wars names this episode. Davo Skulden is one of them. There's also the guy that kind of told all the people in Narkina 5 like what was going on. Zinska. New guy, Zinska, Davo Skulden, some really nice Star Wars names. So, okay, that's what happened this episode. I am very curious to see what happens next episode. It's going to be the concluding chapter of this 3-episode arc. Any closing thoughts, Patrick Willems?
I'm extremely excited for the next episode. This is at this point, there's always the chance that the season will end on a disappointing note. But this far in, 3/4 of the way through season 1 of Andor, I'm like, this is one of my favorite shows of 2022.
Totally. It's my favorite show on television right now. So, and I watch a lot of television.
You do. I'm loving it.
All right. Well, that is going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Decoding TV. Patrick, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
More of my work on the internet can be found over at youtube.com/Patrick H. Willems. And then I'm on, the social media platforms. I'm still there for now, over at Patrick H. Willems.
And you can find us at Decoding TV on YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. Find more episodes of this podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. And of course, email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. Also, I want to point out, next week is going to be a momentous occasion because if everything goes smoothly, which I'm not sure it will, Patrick and I are going to be recording Decoding TV in person for the first and possibly only time ever. So we have both been invited to attend the Hawaii International Film Festival as mentors, and we are both going to be staying in the same hotel and hopefully recording live next week. So that's something we've never done, and it should add a certain frisson to the proceedings. So I'm really looking forward to that, and you can look forward to it too here on Decoding TV. He is Patrick Willems. I'm David Chen. We'll see you next week. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.